Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Prime was bigger than any human city, a gleaming metal structure that spun slowly in the darkness between stars. This was humanity's first meeting with alien life, and Sarah felt the weight of history on her shoulders. "Incredible," whispered Dr. James Park, the mission's lead scientist. "The engineering required to build something like that." Sarah nodded but kept her eyes on the tactical display. 3 months ago, Earth had received a message in perfect English inviting humanity to join the galactic community. The message had come from something called the Hegemony, which claimed to represent thousands of worlds and dozens of species. Now the Defiance, humanity's most advanced ship, was here to make first contact. "Captain," called Communications Officer Lisa Torres, "we're receiving a transmission from the station." "Put it on screen." The image that appeared made several crew members step back. The alien was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. When it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "Human vessel Defiance, you will dock at Bay 94. Your crew will remain aboard while representatives board your ship for inspection." Sarah frowned. "Inspection? We're here for diplomatic talks. All new species must be evaluated before joining galactic society. This is standard procedure." Something about the alien's tone bothered Sarah, but she gave the order to dock. The Defiance slowly moved into the station's docking bay, guided by automated systems that took control of the ship without asking permission. As the docking clamps locked into place, Sarah felt trapped. Through the windows, she could see dozens of alien ships surrounding the station. They were sleek and powerful, making the Defiance look like a child's toy. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "I'm picking up military signals. These aren't merchant ships." Before Sarah could respond, the airlock opened and aliens entered the bridge. They were different from the one on screen, shorter with blue skin and forearms. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. "I am Commander Zix of the Hegemony Enforcement Division," the lead alien announced. "Your species has been evaluated. You are too dangerous to exist freely." Sarah stood up slowly, her hand moving toward her sidearm. "What do you mean?" "In 300 cycles, your species has gone from primitive animals to space travel. This rate of advancement is unacceptable. You will surrender your ship and submit to pacification." "Pacification?" "Your aggressive tendencies will be removed. Your technology will be confiscated. Your species will serve the hegemony as laborers until you prove worthy of freedom." The bridge went silent. Sarah looked around at her crew, 847 men and women who had volunteered for this mission to represent humanity among the stars. She thought of Earth, of her daughter waiting for her return, of the billions of humans who dreamed of joining a galactic community. "And if we refuse?" Sarah asked. Commander Zix's expression didn't change. "Then your species will be eliminated. We have done this to over 200 worlds. Compliance is inevitable." Sarah's tactical display showed the truth of his words. 50 hegemony ships surrounded the station, their weapons powered and ready. The Defiance was trapped, outnumbered, and outgunned. Any reasonable commander would surrender. Sarah Chen had never been accused of being reasonable. "Mr. Rodriguez," she called to her chief engineer. "How long to charge our weapons?" "Captain," Commander Zix said, his voice showing surprise for the first time, "you cannot be serious. You are one ship against the might of the galaxy." "Maybe," Sarah replied, sitting back in her command chair. "But we're human. We don't surrender our freedom to anyone." She opened a communication channel to the entire station. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. To any species listening, know this. Humanity will not kneel. We will not serve. We will not be pacified. Today you learn what happens when you threaten our freedom." Commander Zix raised his weapon, but Sarah was faster. Her pistol appeared in her hand like magic, and the alien commander fell to the deck. The other hegemony soldiers tried to react, but the human crew was ready. In seconds, the bridge was secure. "All hands, battle stations." Sarah shouted into the ship's communication system. "This is not a drill. We are at war." The Defiance shuddered as its weapons came online. On the tactical display, Sarah watched 50 enemy ships turn toward them like sharks sensing blood in the water. "Captain," called Tactical Officer Chen Wang, "they're demanding our surrender." "Send them our answer," Sarah replied. The Defiance's main guns fired, sending streams of plasma into the nearest hegemony ship. The alien vessel's shields flared and held, but Sarah smiled anyway. They had just fired the first shots in humanity's war for survival. Damage report on the enemy ship? Sarah asked. Minimal damage to their shields, Captain, but we got their attention. Around the station, hegemony ships began moving into attack formation. They were being careful, probably surprised that the humans were fighting back. In their experience, new species either surrendered or died quickly. Captain, Dr. Park said from his station, the station is launching escape pods. Looks like other species are trying to flee. Sarah watched the tactical display as hundreds of small craft launched from Nexus Prime. Some were heading for the hegemony ships, but others were flying in random directions, desperate to escape the coming battle. Those are probably slaves, she realized. Species the hegemony conquered. This changed everything. Sarah had thought they were facing a galactic government, but now she understood the truth. The hegemony wasn't a government, it was an empire built on conquest and slavery. Mr. Rodriguez, Sarah called, can we break free of the docking clamps? Give me 30 seconds, Captain. 30 seconds they didn't have. The first hegemony ship opened fire, sending blue energy beams toward the Defiance. The shots hit the station's shields, which absorbed most of the damage, but some energy got through and struck the human ship's hull. Shields down to 80%, Wong reported. Rodriguez. Almost there, Captain. More hegemony ships opened fire. The station's shields failed under the assault and energy beams began hitting the Defiance directly. The ship shook like a toy in an earthquake. Docking clamps released, Rodriguez shouted, full power to engines. Get us out of here! The Defiance shot out of the docking bay like a bullet from a gun. Behind them, Nexus Prime exploded in a ball of fire as hegemony weapons tore it apart. Sarah felt sick watching it die, knowing that thousands of beings had just been killed. They destroyed their own station, Dr. Park whispered. They don't care about anything except power, Sarah replied. That's why we have to stop them. The Defiance raced away from the burning station with 50 enemy ships in pursuit. Sarah knew they couldn't outrun them all, but they didn't need to. They just needed to survive long enough to get a message to Earth. Torres, open a channel to Earth. Maximum power. Channel open, Captain. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing her next words would change human history forever. Earth Command. This is Captain Chen. First contact has failed. The galaxy is ruled by an empire that enslaves or destroys every species it encounters. They have marked humanity for extinction. We are going to fight them, but we're going to need help. Build ships. Build weapons. Build an army. The hegemony thinks we're just another primitive species they can crush. Show them what humans do when someone threatens our home. The communication ended, and Sarah turned back to the tactical display. The hegemony ships were gaining, but the Defiance was heading for the outer system where they might have a chance. What are our odds, Captain? Wong asked. Sarah smiled grimly. Against 50 ships, terrible. But we're not trying to win. We're trying to survive long enough to show Earth what we're facing. The hunt had begun. The Defiance flew through space like a wounded animal being chased by wolves. Behind them, 20 hegemony ships followed in perfect formation, their weapons firing streams of blue energy that lit up the darkness. Evasive maneuvers, Captain Chen shouted as another blast shook the ship. Pilot Maria Santos threw the Defiance into a spinning dive that would have made any human dizzy, but the pursuing ships matched their movement perfectly. Their computers could predict every standard evasive pattern. They're reading our moves before we make them, Santos reported. In the engineering section deep in the ship's belly, Chief Engineer Marcus Rodriguez was having the same problem. Every time he tried to boost power or change their engine output, the enemy sensors seemed to know what he was planning. Prometheus, he called to the ship's artificial intelligence. Can you explain why they're always one step ahead? The AI's voice came through the speakers, calm despite the chaos around them. Analysis suggests hegemony sensors can predict our actions based on standard tactical algorithms. Their technology appears designed to counter conventional warfare. Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead. The engine room was getting hot as he pushed the systems beyond safe limits. What about unconventional warfare? Please elaborate. Can they predict crazy? Meanwhile on the bridge, Dr. Park was studying the enemy ships through their sensors. Captain, I'm seeing something interesting. Their ships move like they're following a program. Very precise, very coordinated, but what? But not creative. It's like they're playing a game with fixed rules. Sarah understood immediately. The hegemony had been conquering species for thousands of years. They had probably seen every type of ship, every weapon, every tactic that any civilization could develop. Warfare had become predictable for them. They had never fought humans before. Santos, forget everything they taught you at flight school. I want you to fly like you're drunk, Captain. Random movements. Don't think about what you're doing. Just do it. Make it impossible for their computers to predict. Santos grinned and grabbed the controls. The Defiant suddenly lurched sideways, then up, then into a corkscrew pattern that made no tactical sense at all. The pursuing hegemony ships hesitated for the first time, their perfect formation breaking as they tried to match movements that followed no pattern. It's working, Wong reported from tactical. They're having trouble targeting us. But the celebration was short-lived. More hegemony ships were arriving from other directions, trying to box the Defiants in. Sarah counted 30 ships now, all converging on their position. Rodriguez, I need more speed. Captain, the engines are already past the red line. If I push them any harder, we might blow up. If you don't push them harder, we definitely blow up. In engineering, Rodriguez stared at his displays and made a decision that would either save them or kill them all. He started disconnecting safety systems that had been built into every human ship. Prometheus, I'm about to do something very stupid. I need you to help me not die. I am programmed to prevent unsafe modifications to ship systems. Override that programming. Captain's orders. The AI was silent for 3 seconds, which was an eternity for a computer. Override accepted. What do you require? Help me turn our mining charges into weapons. The Defiance had been built as an exploration ship, designed to study new worlds and extract mineral samples. In the cargo bay were hundreds of mining charges, small explosives meant to break apart asteroids. They weren't weapons, but Rodriguez had an idea. If we can't outfight them, maybe we can outsmart them. 20 minutes later, the Defiance began dropping objects behind it as it flew. The hegemony ships scanned the objects and dismissed them as debris from damaged systems. Their sensors identified the objects as harmless mining equipment. The first explosion caught them completely by surprise. Rodriguez had turned the mining charges into space mines, programming them to explode when hegemony ships came close. The aliens had never seen anything like it, because no civilized species would use civilian equipment as weapons. Direct hit on the lead ship, Wong reported. Their shields are down and they're falling behind. But Sarah knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Defiance was running out of mining charges, and the hegemony ships were learning to watch for the improvised mines. Captain, Torres called from communications. I'm picking up a transmission. It's not from the hegemony. Put it on screen. A new alien appeared on the main display. This one looked different from the others, smaller, with green skin and large eyes that seemed frightened. Human ship, this is Captain Veek of the merchant vessel Wanderer. We monitored your fight at the station. You freed the slave quarters when you broadcast that message. Sarah was confused. What slave quarters? The entire lower section of Nexus Prime was a slave camp. Over 10,000 beings from conquered worlds. When you transmitted your defiance, it inspired them to revolt. Many escaped in the confusion. The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had been focused on the immediate threat, and hadn't realized that her words had consequences beyond the immediate battle. The hegemony is hunting the escaped slaves, Captain Veek continued. But some of us want to help. We remember what freedom was like before the conquest. What are you asking? Fight with us. Show the galaxy that the hegemony can be defeated. Sarah looked around the bridge. Her crew was exhausted, the ship was damaged, and they were still being chased by an enemy fleet. The smart thing would be to focus on getting home to warn Earth. But 30 years of military service had taught Sarah that sometimes the smart thing wasn't the right thing. Torres, open a channel to all ships in the area. Channel open. Captain. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. To any being who dreams of freedom, who remembers what it was like before the hegemony took your world, hear this. We are going to fight. We are going to show the galaxy that these tyrants can be beaten. Join us if you want your children to be free. The response was immediate. Dozens of ships that had been hiding in the outer system began moving toward the Defiance. They were old ships, merchant vessels and transports that had been converted into fighting ships by beings who had nothing left to lose. Captain, Wong said quietly, we've got 73 ships joining us, but the hegemony fleet now has over 100 ships. Sarah smiled. The odds were still terrible, but they were no longer alone. Prometheus, can you coordinate with the other ships? Help them fight together? I can establish communication links and tactical coordination. However, their ship systems are very different from ours. Do your best. Rodriguez, how are those engines holding up? They're screaming, but they're still working. I've got maybe an hour before something critical fails. Then we'd better make it count. All ships, this is Defiance. We're going to teach the hegemony something they've forgotten. What's that, Captain? Santos asked. That freedom is worth fighting for. The mixed fleet of human and alien ships turned to face the pursuing hegemony forces. It should have been a massacre, but something unexpected happened. The escaped slaves and rebel merchants fought with a desperation that the hegemony had never seen before. They used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and tactics that made no sense except to beings who had nothing left to lose. And at the center of it all, the Defiance continued to fight with a style that confused and frustrated the hegemony commanders. Humans didn't follow the rules of civilized warfare because they didn't know there were rules. The battle raged for 6 hours across 2 star systems. When it was over, both sides had paid a terrible price. The hegemony had lost 30 ships, more than they had lost in the last century combined. The rebel fleet was almost completely destroyed. But the Defiance was still flying, still broadcasting its message of defiance to the galaxy. And somewhere behind them, racing toward Earth at maximum speed, a single escape pod carried the complete records of the battle. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had arrived, and they played by different rules. Rodriguez looked at his displays and laughed despite the exhaustion. Captain, you're not going to believe this. None, what is it? The mining charges we used as weapons. Prometheus figured out how to improve them. We accidentally invented a new type of space mine. Sarah laughed too, understanding that this was how humans fought. Not with superior technology or perfect tactics, but with creativity, stubbornness, and the absolute refusal to give up. The war had only just begun. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood in the command center deep beneath the Colorado mountains, staring at screens that showed humanity's response to Captain Chen's message. 3 weeks had passed since the transmission arrived from the battle at Nexus Prime, and Earth had transformed into something unrecognizable. Show me the shipyard reports, Hayes ordered. The main screen filled with data that would have seemed impossible a month ago. Every orbital facility around Earth was building warships. The Luna shipyards had tripled their output by working around the clock. Mars colonies were converting their mining equipment into weapons manufacturing. Even the asteroid belt miners were stripping their ships and rebuilding them as fighting vessels. How many ships do we have ready? Hayes asked her aide, Colonel Martinez. 237 combat-capable vessels with another 63 launching within the week. It's not a traditional fleet, Admiral. Hayes nodded grimly. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 25 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. When the governments of Earth received Captain Chen's message, the response had been immediate and unprecedented. Every nation had contributed resources. Every corporation had offered their facilities. Every person on Earth understood that this was about survival. Show me the ship classifications. The screen changed to show the weird collection of vessels humanity was calling a fleet. Cargo haulers had been fitted with missile launchers. Passenger liners had been converted into troop transports. Mining ships had become mobile weapons platforms. Research vessels were now equipped with sensors that could detect enemy ships across star systems. The Henderson's Dream was a luxury cruise ship last month, Martinez pointed out. Now it's carrying enough firepower to level a city. And the crew? Volunteers, all of them. The captain used to run tourist trips to the outer planets. Now he's training his staff to fight aliens. Hayes walked to the window that looked out over the command center floor. Hundreds of people worked at stations, coordinating the largest military buildup in human history. Scientists were developing new weapons based on the data from the Defiance's battle. Engineers were designing ship modifications that would let civilian vessels fight in space. Military strategists were trying to plan for a war unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Admiral, called Communications Specialist Davis, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Defiance. Hayes hurried to the communication station. For 3 weeks, they had received only automated distress signals from Captain Chen's ship. This was the first direct communication since the battle. Put it on screen. Captain Chen appeared on the display, and Hayes barely recognized her. The woman looked exhausted, with bandages on her face and burns on her uniform. Behind her, the bridge of the Defiance showed signs of heavy damage. Earth Command, this is Captain Chen. We're still alive, but barely. The hegemony has been hunting us across 6 star systems. We've learned a lot about their capabilities and weaknesses. Chen paused to cough, and Hayes noticed blood on her lips. The good news is that they can be beaten. Their technology is superior. But they're not used to fighting beings who refuse to surrender. The bad news is that they're taking us seriously now. I estimate 300 hegemony ships are searching for us. The transmission flickered, and alarms could be heard in the background. Admiral, we're about to attempt something that's either brilliant or suicidal. We're going to try to reach the Kepler system, where our long-range sensors detected what might be a rebel base. If we're wrong, this will be my last transmission. Captain, Hayes said, even though she knew Chen couldn't hear her. Tell Earth to hurry. The Hegemony Council is meeting to decide whether to send a full invasion fleet to our solar system. If they decide we're a real threat, they'll send everything they have. We're talking about thousands of ships, Admiral. Maybe tens of thousands. The transmission cut out, leaving the command center in silence. Davis, when did we receive this? 15 minutes ago, Admiral. Given the distance, it was sent over a week ago. Hayes closed her eyes and did the math. If the Hegemony sent a fleet now, it would reach Earth in 3 to 4 months. Humanity would have less than 100 days to prepare for the greatest battle in human history. Martinez, get me a connection to every world leader. Emergency protocol. 20 minutes later, Hayes was addressing the emergency council that had been formed to coordinate Earth's response. The faces on the screen represented every major nation and corporation on Earth. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a timeline. Captain Chen believes the hegemony will decide within days whether to invade our solar system. If they do, we have approximately 90 days before they arrive. President Williams of North America spoke first. Admiral, what are our chances with the current fleet? Hayes had been dreading this question. Against a small hegemony force, we might survive. Against a full invasion fleet, we'll be destroyed within hours. Then what do you recommend? We need to change the nature of the fight. The hegemony expects us to meet them in space with traditional naval tactics. Instead, we make them fight on our terms. She activated a new display showing Earth's solar system. We turn our entire solar system into a fortress. Mining charges on every asteroid. Missile platforms hidden throughout the asteroid belt. Mobile defense stations that can move and hide. We make them fight for every mile of space between Neptune and Earth. Prime Minister Chen of the Asian Federation nodded slowly. A guerrilla war in space? Exactly. Captain Chen's reports show that the hegemony doesn't understand irregular warfare. They've conquered hundreds of species, but they've never fought anyone who refused to play by their rules. What about civilian evacuation? Asked President Okafor of the African Union. There's nowhere to run. If we lose here, they'll hunt down every human in the galaxy. This is our stand. The council voted unanimously to implement Hayes' plan. Within hours, new orders went out across the solar system. Asteroid miners began hollowing out rocks and filling them with explosives. Space stations were fitted with engines so they could move and hide. Civilian ships were given military escorts and sent to establish hidden supply bases in the outer system. But the most important work was happening in the shipyards. Hayes' plan required a very specific type of vessel, ships that could hit hard and disappear quickly. Traditional warships were too big and too slow. Instead, humanity began building something new. Show me the mosquito design, Hayes ordered. The screen displayed plans for a ship that looked more like a missile than a vessel. It was small, fast, and carried a single powerful weapon. The entire ship was designed to be built quickly and cheaply, using parts from civilian vessels. Each mosquito costs about the same as a luxury car, Martinez explained. They're meant to be expendable. Hit the enemy and either escape or die trying. How many can we build? With current production rates, about 50 per day. By the time the hegemony arrives, we could have 4,000 of them. Hayes smiled for the first time in weeks. The hegemony expected to fight warships. Instead, they would face swarms of tiny vessels that could appear from anywhere and disappear just as quickly. What about volunteers for the mosquito squadrons? Admiral, we have more volunteers than ships. Fighter pilots, racing pilots, commercial transport captains, everyone wants to fly them. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Earth's orbital space filled with construction scaffolds and half-built ships. The asteroid belt became a maze of hidden weapons and supply depots. Every human settlement in the solar system contributed to the war effort. And throughout it all, updates continued to arrive from the Defiance. Captain Chen's ship had found the rebel base and was working with escaped slaves from dozens of worlds. The news they sent was both encouraging and terrifying. The Hegemony Council had voted. A fleet of over 5,000 ships was being assembled for the invasion of Earth. But something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. News of humanity's defiance was spreading to enslaved worlds. Species that had been conquered centuries ago were beginning to rebel. The hegemony was facing uprisings on dozens of worlds. Hayes read the latest intelligence report with growing hope. Humanity wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. They had become a symbol of resistance for every enslaved species in the galaxy. "Admiral," Davis called. "Priority transmission from Deep Space Monitoring." "What is it?" "We're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the solar system. The hegemony fleet has arrived early." Hayes felt her stomach drop. According to their calculations, they still had a month to prepare. "How many ships?" "Sensors are having trouble getting an exact count, but preliminary estimates suggest over 6,000 vessels." Hayes looked around the command center at the hundreds of people who had worked without sleep to prepare for this moment. Earth's defense fleet consisted of 300 converted civilian ships and 2,000 mosquito fighters. By any reasonable calculation, they were about to be completely destroyed. But Hayes had learned something important from Captain Chen's reports. Humans didn't fight reasonable wars. "Martinez, send the signal to all ships and stations. Execute Operation Swarm." Across the solar system, hidden weapons platforms came online. Thousands of mosquito fighters launched from concealed bases. Converted civilian ships powered up their improvised weapon systems. The hegemony had come to conquer. A primitive Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the largest fleet in human history prepare for battle. Around her massive converted colony ship, 300 vessels of every size and description waited for the order to attack. They looked nothing like a proper military fleet, but that was exactly the point. "Fleet status report," Vasquez ordered. "All ships report ready, Admiral," replied her communications officer. "The Mosquito squadrons are in position throughout the asteroid belt. Hidden weapons platforms are armed and waiting." Through the main viewer, Vasquez could see the hegemony fleet approaching Earth. 6,000 ships in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver against the black of space. It was the largest military force ever assembled, designed to crush humanity's rebellion once and for all. The enemy fleet moved with mechanical precision, following patterns that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their admiral probably expected the humans to meet them in traditional battle formation, where superior numbers and technology would ensure a quick victory. Vasquez had other plans. "Signal from Captain Chen," the communications officer announced. "The Defiance is 3 hours out." Vasquez nodded. Chen's ship had somehow survived weeks of running battles across the galaxy and was racing back to join the defense of Earth. The Defiance was barely functional, but its presence would inspire the human fleet. "Admiral," called her tactical officer, "the hegemony fleet is broadcasting a surrender demand. Let's hear it." The main screen filled with the image of an alien that looked like a giant insect. Its voice was cold and emotionless when it spoke. "Primitive humans, I am Supreme Admiral Corex of the Hegemony Fleet. Your resistance ends now. Surrender your vessels and submit to pacification, or we will destroy every human world." Vasquez opened a channel to respond. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Fleet. You want our surrender? Come and take it." The communication ended, and Vasquez turned to address her bridge crew. These weren't military officers, they were civilian volunteers who had signed up to defend their home. The New Horizons' original crew had been farmers and colonists heading to a new world. Now they were warriors in humanity's greatest battle. "People of Earth," Vasquez broadcast to the entire fleet. "Today we stand between freedom and slavery. Today we show the galaxy what humans do when someone threatens our families. Today we teach these aliens that some things are worth dying for." The hegemony fleet began its approach, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Their ships moved in perfect formations that had never been defeated. Their weapons could destroy human vessels with single shots. Their shields could absorb anything humanity could throw at them. They had never fought humans before. "Execute Phase 1, Vasquez ordered. Throughout the asteroid belt, thousands of hidden weapons suddenly activated. Rocks that had looked dead for millions of years exploded outward, revealing missile batteries and gun platforms. The hegemony's sensors had detected nothing because humans had hidden their weapons inside actual asteroids. The first wave of missiles streaked toward the enemy fleet like angry hornets. Hegemony point defense systems activated, shooting down most of the missiles, but dozens got through. Explosions blossomed across their shields, causing minimal damage but achieving something more important. Surprise. They're confused, reported the tactical officer. Their formation is breaking as they try to identify threats. Phase 2. From hidden bases throughout the solar system, clouds of mosquito fighters launched into space. Each one was tiny compared to the hegemony ships, no bigger than an old fighter jet. But there were thousands of them, and they moved with the unpredictability that humans had learned was their greatest weapon. The mosquito pilots were volunteers from every corner of human space. Racing pilots who knew how to fly faster than should be possible. Transport captains who understood how to navigate through impossible spaces. Fighter jocks who had trained their entire lives for a battle like this. Each mosquito carried a single weapon, a mining charge that had been converted into a ship killer. They couldn't penetrate hegemony shields, but they didn't need to. Their job was to get close enough to attach their charges to enemy hulls, then detonate them from the inside. Mosquito Squadron Alpha reporting contact with enemy patrol, came a voice over the radio. Beginning attack runs. Vasquez watched on her tactical display as tiny human fighters swarmed around massive alien warships. The hegemony gunners couldn't target something so small and fast, while their defensive screens were designed to stop missiles. Hot kamikazes. The first hegemony ship died when a mosquito pilot named Sarah Kim flew her fighter directly into the enemy vessel's engine intake. The explosion tore the ship apart from the inside, sending debris spinning into space. First kill confirmed, Kim's wingman reported. Sarah's away, but she took them with her. More mosquito pilots followed Kim's example. They flew their tiny ships into impossible spaces, attached their charges to critical systems, and either escaped or died in the resulting explosions. It was suicide warfare, but every pilot understood what was at stake. Admiral, the tactical officer called. The enemy is adapting. They're changing formation to protect their larger ships. Then we change too, signal the fleet, begin Phase 3. The converted civilian ships that made up humanity's main fleet began their attack run. They looked nothing like military vessels because they weren't. The New Horizon had been a colony ship. The Henderson's Dream had been a luxury cruise liner. The Fortune's Favor had been a cargo hauler. But they all carried weapons now, and more importantly, they carried human crews who refused to surrender. All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. Remember, we're not trying to fight fair. We're trying to win. Use everything we learned from Captain Chen's reports. Be unpredictable, be crazy. Make them fight our kind of war. The human fleet attacked with tactics that horrified the civilized galaxy. Cargo ships rammed into hegemony vessels, sacrificing themselves to damage enemy shields. Passenger liners launched boarding parties that fought through alien ships with weapons improvised from mining equipment. Research vessels used their sensors to guide missile strikes from hidden platforms. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding the mining ship Earth's Fortune, led a group of converted haulers in a maneuver that broke every rule of space combat. Instead of fighting at long range like proper warships, they flew directly into the hegemony formation and opened fire at point-blank range. This is Earth's Fortune, Rodriguez broadcast as his ship traded shots with a hegemony cruiser 3 times its size. My crew used to move asteroids for a living. Now we're going to move you straight to hell. The mining ship's improvised weapons tore into the enemy vessel's hull, while the cruiser's return fire slowly destroyed Rodriguez's ship. Both vessels died together in a ball of fire, but the human crew had taken a major hegemony warship with them. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Humans fought with a desperation and creativity that the hegemony had never encountered. They used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and weapons that weren't supposed to work in space combat. Admiral, reported the communications officer, Captain Chen is requesting permission to join the battle. The Defiance is in no condition to fight. She says her crew disagrees. On the tactical display, Vasquez watched a small dot racing toward the battle. The Defiance was held together by prayers and spare parts, but it was still flying. More importantly, it was broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Defiance, came the familiar voice. To every human ship, to every species fighting for freedom, hear this. We are not going to lose. We are not going to surrender. Today we show the galaxy that tyranny ends here. The arrival of the Defiance seemed to inspire the entire human fleet. Ships that had been retreating turned around and rejoined the fight. Mosquito pilots who had been conserving their ammunition began making attack runs against impossible odds. The battle raged for 8 hours. When it was over, both sides had paid a terrible price. The human fleet was almost completely destroyed, with only a few dozen ships still functional. But the hegemony had lost over 1,000 vessels, including several of their most powerful warships. More importantly, they had lost something else: their aura of invincibility. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "the hegemony fleet is withdrawing to the outer system." Vasquez couldn't believe it. The aliens had the numbers to finish off the remaining human ships, but they were retreating. For the first time in their history, the hegemony had encountered an enemy that scared them. "Signal from Supreme Admiral Corex," the communications officer announced. The insect-like alien appeared on screen again, but this time his composure was shaken. "Human Admiral, your species fights without honor. Your tactics are barbaric. You came to our home to enslave our children," Vasquez replied. "Did you expect us to fight fair? This battle changes nothing. The hegemony will return with more ships. Then we'll be ready for you." The transmission ended and Vasquez looked around her damaged bridge. The New Horizon was barely functional, but it was still flying. Throughout the solar system, the survivors of humanity's fleet were regrouping and preparing for the next Ate species. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking out at the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. Earth hung in space before them, blue and white and perfect, still free after the greatest battle in human history. The ship around her was held together by determination and spare parts, but it had brought her home. "Captain," called Dr. Park from his station, "we're receiving docking instructions from Earth Command." Sarah nodded but didn't move from the window. 3 months ago, she had left Earth as an explorer, hoping to make peaceful contact with galactic civilization. Now she was returning as a warrior, having fired the first shots in humanity's war for survival. Communications. "Open a channel to Admiral Hayes." The main screen flickered to life, showing the Admiral in the underground command center. Hayes looked exhausted but victorious, and Sarah could see celebration in the background as Earth celebrated their impossible victory. "Captain Chen, welcome home. I have to say your ship looks terrible." Sarah laughed, surprising herself. "She's been through a lot, Admiral. But the Defiance brought us home. Your crew's data on hegemony tactics and technology has been invaluable. Without your intelligence, we never could have planned our defense. What's our status?" Hayes' expression grew serious. "We won the battle, but we're not celebrating yet. Our deep space monitors are tracking massive fleet movements throughout hegemony space. They're pulling ships from every sector." "How many?" "Best estimate is 20,000 vessels. Maybe more. They're going to throw everything they have at us." Sarah felt the weight of that number. Humanity had barely survived against 6,000 ships. 20,000 would be impossible to defeat in direct combat. "When will they arrive?" 6 months, assuming they gather their full strength first. That gives us time to prepare, but it also gives them time to plan for our tactics. Sarah understood the problem immediately. The hegemony had been surprised by human fighting methods, but they learned quickly. The next battle would be against an enemy that knew what to expect. "Admiral, request permission to address the fleet commanders. I have some ideas." 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in a room with the surviving commanders of Earth's defense fleet. Admiral Vasquez was there, her arm in a sling from the battle. Captain Rodriguez had survived the destruction of his ship and was already planning his next vessel. Dozens of other officers who had fought impossible odds and somehow lived. "The hegemony is going to return with everything they have," Sarah began. "We can't fight them the same way. We need to change the nature of the war itself." Admiral Hayes activated a holographic display showing the local region of the galaxy. "What do you propose?" "We don't wait for them to come to us. We take the fight to them." The room went silent. Fighting a defensive battle in their home system was one thing, but attacking the hegemony across interstellar space seemed impossible. "Captain," said Admiral Vasquez, "we barely have 100 functional ships left. How do we attack an empire that spans thousands of worlds?" Sarah smiled and activated her own display, showing intelligence gathered during the Defiance's months-long chase across the galaxy. "Because the hegemony has a weakness they don't know about. They rule through fear, but that fear is built on a lie. Most of their empire is held together by conquered species who hate them. We just need to show those species that the hegemony can be beaten." She highlighted several star systems on the map. These are slave worlds, planets where the hegemony keeps conquered populations to work in their factories and mines. The security is light because the aliens never thought anyone would be crazy enough to attack them. A liberation campaign, Admiral Hayes said slowly. Free the slaves and turn them into allies. Exactly. Every species we free becomes part of our fleet. Every world we liberate becomes a base for further operations. We turn the hegemony's own empire against them. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. It's brilliant, but we'd need ships that can travel fast and hit hard. Guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale. Which brings me to my second point, Sarah continued. We build a new kind of fleet. Not massive battleships that the hegemony can track and destroy, but small, fast ships that can appear anywhere and disappear just as quickly. She showed them the design plans that Dr. Park and the Defiance's crew had developed during their long journey home. The ships looked nothing like traditional warships. They were smaller, faster, and designed to be built quickly using salvaged materials. We call them Freedom-class raiders. Each one carries a crew of 20 and enough firepower to destroy a hegemony patrol ship. They're built to be expendable, but more importantly, they're built to inspire. Admiral Hayes studied the plans carefully. How many can we build? With our current industrial capacity, we could have 1,000 ready in 4 months. But that's just Earth's contribution. If we can convince other species to join us, we could have 10,000. Other species? Sarah activated another display. This one showing the rebel network she had discovered during her escape from hegemony space. There are resistance groups on dozens of worlds. Species that have been planning rebellion for centuries but never had the courage to act. We give them hope, and they give us numbers. The meeting went on for hours as the commanders planned humanity's transformation from a single-world species to leaders of a galactic rebellion. It was audacious, impossible, and completely insane. It was also the only chance they had. 3 months later, the first Freedom-class raiders launched from hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. They were crewed by volunteers from every walk of life, former pilots, engineers, scientists, even artists and teachers who had learned to fight for their freedom. Each ship carried a simple message that was broadcast to every world they visited. The hegemony can be defeated. Humanity stands with all free beings. Join us and take back your worlds. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On the industrial world of Kepler 438b, the enslaved population rose up when a single human raider destroyed the orbital defense platform. On the mining colonies in the Vega system, 3 different species joined forces to overthrow their hegemony overseers. Within 6 weeks, 12 star systems had declared independence from the hegemony. Within 2 months, that number had grown to 30. The galactic empire that had seemed unshakable was beginning to crack, but the hegemony wasn't standing still. Their massive fleet continued to gather, preparing for what they called the final solution, the complete destruction of humanity and any species that supported them. The real test came when the human raiders encountered a hegemony battle fleet in the Proxima system. 3 Freedom-class ships against 30 enemy vessels should have been a massacre. Instead, it became the template for everything that followed. The human ships didn't try to fight a traditional battle. They used hit-and-run tactics, struck at critical systems, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. When the hegemony ships gave chase, they found themselves facing not just the human raiders, but hundreds of ships crewed by freed slaves who had nothing left to lose. The Battle of Proxima lasted 3 days and ended with the destruction of the entire hegemony fleet. More importantly, it proved that the Empire's military could be defeated by coordinated resistance. News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved populations began to believe that freedom was possible. Resistance groups that had hidden for centuries came out into the open. Species that had been enemies for millennia united against their common oppressor. Captain Sarah Chen, now commanding a fleet of 50 human and alien ships, sat in her new flagship watching reports pour in from across the galaxy. The hegemony was losing control, their empire fragmenting as world after world declared independence. "Captain," called her communications officer. "Message from Earth Command." Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen, and for the first time since Sarah had known her, the woman was smiling. "Sarah, I thought you'd like to know. Our deep space monitors have detected something interesting. The hegemony superfleet that was heading for Earth, It's been recalled. They're using those ships to try to hold their empire together. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. So we're not fighting for survival anymore. No, Captain. Now we're fighting to win. The transmission ended and Sarah looked out at her mixed fleet of human raiders and alien rebels. 6 months ago, humanity had been alone in the galaxy, facing extinction at the hands of an empire that had never known defeat. Now they were leading the greatest rebellion in galactic history. The war was far from over. The hegemony still controlled thousands of worlds and commanded fleets that numbered in the tens of thousands. They would fight desperately to maintain their empire, and many more beings would die before freedom was won. But something fundamental had changed. The galaxy had learned that tyranny could be defeated, that freedom was worth fighting for, and that sometimes the smallest actions could change the course of history. One ship had defied an empire. One battle had inspired a rebellion. One species had shown the galaxy what it meant to be free. The real war was just beginning. But for the first time in millennia, the forces of freedom had reason to hope. In the depths of space, the Defiance continued its journey among the stars. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.